Even to the extent that some women's legs, for example, are looked at as sexual objects. Yeah. So if a man was to approach you at a desk and put his hand on your leg,
that would be wild.
That's wild. Whereas there's been many times in the office where a lady might come close to me and she might just, and it's not seen as
and that's not problem. But then
I'm saying, that's because when you.
I could stay like this, forever following you.
Hi, my name is Alex, and I'm the serious one of the group. And today we'll be discussing the METOO movement. Let's get started.
So, what is the METOO campaign?
Essentially, it's a campaign that was started on Twitter. It was a hashtag campaign of women in the film industry that were coming out, essentially speaking on incidents in which they've been sexually abused.
What was significant about it also is that the abuse was coming from men who held like authority and were in a position to influence the outcome of their careers, and for how long people had been suffering, or this had been like the culture in the entertainment industry. Like people then felt empowered to come forward and say, actually, do you know what, this is what's been happening and this is not acceptable anymore.
And I think the catalyst was like the Harvey Weinstein thing, and because it's been an issue that's been rampant in the entertainment industry for many years, it was quite like a pivotal thing where the entire essentially entertainment industry, like Hollywood specifically, kind of was turned around and said, we've known about this for years and we finally, feel like we can say something now because something can actually be done.
Harvey Weinstein, he's an institution. Himself is an institution in a male-dominated society, male-dominated environment, industry. To go against, just someone who social media probably wasn't as active right then, probably didn't have a platform or voice. To go against Harvey Weinstein, then it's like going against like a Microsoft or Apple as a small tech company.
I remember watching a documentary or an interview on the two about literally this topic, and so the person that they were interviewing was kind of speaking about how almost this was the industry. So in that sense, it wasn't seen as anything else. It was almost like, if you wanted to bag a starring role in a certain movie in Hollywood, it was just something like everyone knew. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like, oh, I'm so surprised that this person's done it. There would be loads of people that would have known that this had happened, but it was just the nature of the industry at the time. So a lot of people probably didn't necessarily perceive it as sexual assault. So the people that were being abused and assaulted, they probably just looked at it like, oh, well, this is what I have to do.
I think there's been a huge conversation about consent at the moment, and what do we deem as sexual assault, and what do we deem as, at what point can you stop consenting or begin consent? So I think maybe people have been in situations beforehand and have felt that actually, if I go back to that, was I consenting to that? If I was under the influence, could I then possibly be in a position to consent? And so then therefore that was assault, or that was rape.
So thinking about sexual assault and sexual harassment, are there blurred lines, and is the argument lopsided?
A common misconception is that with sexual harassment cases and sexual assault cases, people always find the examples and the scenarios that are so in the grey area. And I think the common occurrence is hardly ever in that grey area. I think there are instances, not to take away from that, but I think the majority of scenarios that are usually brought up by people are like, oh, so what if, she was naked in the shower? Does that mean she's not, she's not consenting? She's gone all those steps. And it's like, to get to situations like that is very, very rare.
It depends on what the situation is. So, for example, I don't know if you guys saw, I think it was last week, came out that one of these popular on-air radio personalities was having a discussion. No, Charlemagne. So he was talking about rape culture and saying how, he didn't realise how much he was a part of, how he contributed to rape culture until he had daughters and stuff. And there was one time when
how he contributed
as in not how he contributed to rape culture, but how he participated in rape. Not that he was raping women, but like the misogynistic views, and also maybe possibly the way he treated women, because rape culture is not just the act forcefully having sex with someone. It's lyrics in music, it's the way that we view all of that. So he was saying how one time himself, the first time he had sexual intercourse with his wife, they were both drunk. So technically could she consent? Could she not consent? Was that rape? Was that not rape? They were in a relationship, you know, but they were both drunk. And then people, like, everybody was coming for him saying, oh, you know, you basically had raped your wife because she wasn't in a position to consent. So in that situation, the lines there, you could say, possibly, if you wanted to argue it, are blurred.
I think
because they were both drunk.
True, but
not because she was his wife.
I saw I saw the Fallout video when they got her on the radio, and I didn't watch the thing before that, which would be off Instagram. But she came out and said, they were both drunk, but she knew what she was doing.
Because the context was that they were essentially in a relationship beforehand, so it wasn't a case of like he had just met her that night and slept with her drunk. They were clearly... But
even in that, is that rape? That's my question.
But that's a completely different context. So I think that is sexual assault because you can't assume consent. I think where someone you're in a relationship with and you've slept together before and you're both drunk, I think there's to an extent you can assume consent. I'm not saying it's completely perfect or there isn't a grey area there, but that's a completely different context or situation to I met a girl at a party, both got drunk and I decided to sleep with her. From her point of view, something that would have happened despite their state. Okay. So I think it's a bit of a different context. It is a grey area, I completely agree, but I think it's different than if you had just met a random girl.
I feel like there are a lot of men, who sexually, and men and women too, but you know, men who sexually assault or they step beyond like what would be considered as like a reasonable remit because they don't understand that they're crossing boundaries that you actually need to but it's because almost like an entitlement that, you know, like I'm a man, so I can do what I want basically. And I think now that women are educated about their rights and are taking ownership of their bodies, I think maybe that's why it's like, oh wow. So I'm sure there are a lot of celebrities or people in positions of power that have probably found themselves in a situation where it's been a boozy night and you know, they've maybe taken advantage of someone and they're thinking, wow, like I didn't actually realise that, you know, I was doing that or that it was a problem to this extent.
I remember when Terry Crews came out about him being sexually abused and stuff in the industry, and I remember when he finally came out and stuff, and some of the comments that I'll read on Twitter underneath, like, a guy as big as you and you're letting them touch you and this and that kind of stuff, and it's just mad because obviously he's a massive physical presence, but the fact that he can still be a victim to that means that it's more than just physical, it's definitely psychological, and it's completely swept under the rug, and kind of like, why couldn't you defend yourself? Situation.
I think that's used into a whole different area of in terms of just Terry Crews, him being a black man,
a big
black man.
A big black man, and the kind of connotation, expectations, or we have of men of that stature.
100%.
To be aggressive, to be handle their emotions physically. Another
I think I was going to say to your point about, I think if it was a bit different, if it was like a white man and he decided to come forward, I think the METOO movement would have stepped in a bit more
100%.
Than they did with the Terry Crews one, because I think that's a separate thing. I think the METOO movement also doesn't recognise women of colour or men of colour, essentially.
You think they recognise women of colour?
I really don't think it's as they're not, you know, pushing for their rights as much, and it's clear.
It's just the same. It's just the same thing with like the white feminism movement. I just feel like the white feminism movement doesn't always account for the black experience. And I think a group of people who are disenfranchised or on the fringes of society, you would expect them to understand that actually there are experiences that we both share. And then are even further compounded by the fact that I'm black, and then the fact that I'm also, you know, a woman. But I think the white feminism movement doesn't always rush to the aid of women of colour. And even the fact that the METOO movement, the campaign was started by a black woman, Tarana Burke, and yet still it was hijacked by, you know, whoever. And it's just another instance in history where the white feminist movement haven't necessarily always come to the aid of women of colour.
So from my experience, I have a male colleague. He told me about a friend who works in another institution, And a woman came up to him and grabbed his chest and said, "Wow, you've been going to the gym," and walked off. And so the colleague was saying to me that if that was a woman,
it's
the end of story.
I guess this is where like the whole blur thing comes into it, because I've not known that to be sexual assault to men, because that's happened to me.
Okay,
right.
Whether it's the
whether it's arm,
whether it's the arm.
I'm so sorry. I should not. That's so
so whether it's the arm.
But see, this is bad. So even in that, and our response was to laugh. That's problematic.
Yeah. But the difference is between male and female physicalities. The reason it's sexual assault for a woman is because there's a power infringement there, where it's like I almost am. Like, I can't defend myself. Like,
but that's his personal space.
True, but
one can't really defend himself.
I cannot. That's happened to me. Like whether it's the arm, the chest, the shoulders, or the hair, head kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I can't react, and I guess I don't want to react in an aggressive way because of how it will be taken across or perceived.
Yeah.
And that is all I will say on that topic.
I think just adding to that carefully. It's difficult in that situation because being a black male, I can imagine it's even harder for you because you're quite a big guy. I think we already have a natural perception that we're aggressive and stuff like that. So it's almost like something could be happening to you, and even though physically, yes, you could do something, it's like the psychology of it. It's like, I can't actually, because if I react, they'll probably turn around and be like, I didn't mean it.
It was only banter.
It's only banter, and then you've now reacted, and then all of a sudden the words come around, he's a bit aggressive.
But then if you could report and you know that it will be taken seriously, in your honest truth, would you? I don't think I would.
I don't think I would.
But did you feel in those instances that you were violated?
Yeah, sometimes.
No.
I'm genuinely asking.
Okay, fair enough. Not for me, because I hear the stories that I guess the stories that are out there and the experience that women have gone through, and I can't equate what I've been through, which is probably wrong.
Well, I'm asking that because do you think then there's a difference between that happening to you and that happening to me, per se? Do you get what I mean? If it's the same act.
I think it's the way society looks.
You don't think there's a difference between a girl touching your chest and a guy touching mine?
100, but can I picture?
Do you know what I think? I'm not taking away.
I think it's because of the way society perceives our bodies. Yeah. Even to the extent that some women's legs, for example, I looked at as sexual objects.
Yeah.
So if a man was to approach you at a desk and put his hand on your leg,
that would be wild.
That's wild. Whereas there's been many times in the office where a lady might come close to me and she might just, and it's not seen as
and that's not problem. But then that's the point, though.
That's
when you get into a situation where, like, going back to the whole a man assaulting a woman, some of the questions you might hear in response, like, is, well, what was she wearing?
Right.
Did she have a low-cut top? Was she were her legs on show? Right. Do you know what I'm saying? Because the physicality, the feminine physicalities are deemed a lot more sexual than the man's physicality.
Different. And I think we have to be honest and say it's not the same experience. I'm not to say that men can't be. Of course, and I think men are even assaulted more because the perception is that it's not as like sexual if I touch, your shoulder or linger a bit too long, or a woman touches your chest. But I'm just saying the experience is completely different because of the physicality, and also because generally, not to say every woman, but generally women are in more vulnerable than the male counterparts. So I think physically we are.
Physically, yes.
But that plays into it. That's very significant because a man touching you, even on your shoulder, like it might not even be sexual in that sense, but there's an element of dominance there. Yeah, whereas me doing that, there's no. Do you get the dominance of the power shift has already shifted?
Not necessarily. If a white woman was to touch me, and she has done, on my chest, like it would. She's in a position of power, just as it is. Yeah. So from myself and Danny as young black men. Even if we were in the same role as a white woman, and she did sexually assault us or harass, there is a feeling psychologically where we can't say anything because she is of a position of privilege, of authority, that I feel like women would have towards the same dynamics between women and men. It's not on the same scale, but it is just something that we would go through, which is why I asked Danny earlier, would he report? He said yes. I still think...
That's a yes.
No, if it was to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
Like if someone was guaranteed, if it was guaranteed to be
Taken seriously.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Remembering a lot.
No, I don't know if I don't know if I would, because I think
It'll be
my
tough
mind's
to-
just so conditioned to just
Even if
just
you do
overlooking it.
We're talking about the METOO movement in terms of women reporting against men who are like high profile figures and stuff. But like even like normal on a day to day, like rape victims or sexual assault victims, there's still a reluctance of people coming forward to report those things, and it doesn't, like, yes, we're speaking about the METOO campaign and stuff like that, but sexual assault is still rife on your day to day on a very local level.
Very basic. Even getting on a tube, just walking through.
The scenario changes, but the institution and society doesn't.
Exactly.
So you're not in Hollywood, but there's still a patriarchal society.
And it's still that
male-dominated
entitlement
society.
and that entitlement that I guess male privilege.
Exactly.
So that Me Too campaign and the whole Hollywood situation is only a reflection of
white
microcosm.
Right.
So I have a question regarding a particular case. How should we as a culture respond to a particular case like Nate Parker? It was about him participating in a gang rape and when he was about 20. And it was him and his friend. His friend was charged during trial and he was acquitted for this charge. Now, all of this news came out when he produced and was the lead actor of Birth of a Nation, which is a highly racial motivated movie. So all of this came out and there was so much uproar about him and against him. So my question is to understand, like, how do you treat someone who has been acquitted for a sexual allegation?
That's quite interesting because I was having this conversation with literally one of my colleagues this week, and we were speaking about, I can't remember the exact case that we were speaking about, but we were speaking about a case and the influence of the media around a case these days. Essentially, she was saying, if you have the option of not going to trial, just don't go, because before the trials even reach a judgment, or as soon as the allegation's made, the media are all over it, right? And they're more likely to side with the person who's claiming to be the victim. Now, I say claiming to be the victim because the case hasn't come to an end. They haven't been proven guilty or not guilty at that point. They always side with the victim. So even now when you come out of that case, or before the case has even started, for example, if now it's all over the newspaper, you pick a jury, if I'm going to talk about a certain system, you pick a jury, this jury have now read the papers, all of the different angles that the media have come from. They're already, it's impossible to pick an independent jury these days. And then even once the case is now closed, like we're kind of talking about it here, it was only alleged. He was proved not guilty, yet there's still a negative perception towards him, even though all he can do is prove himself not guilty, and that's what he did. Do you know what I mean? So coming back to that, we should look at him as an innocent man, as he technically is. But it's difficult in the society with the way that the media operate for you to ever be proven solely guilty once an allegation has been made against you.
So I think it's a bit different with the Nate Parker thing as well, because his context is that he's a black man, and I think it may have played out differently in terms of the scope of the incident if he was white. I think there may not have been as much, I think there would have been an uproar, but because it happened slightly earlier than the Harvey Weinstein thing, it could have been considerably maybe swept under the rug a tiny bit more, because there were others in his position, in his producers in the industry in Hollywood that may have had similar pasts and similar backgrounds, that haven't had their movies and projects sort of like sidetracked the way Nate Parker did. Not to take away completely the way Nate Parker participated in his incident, but I think ultimately the question was, if someone is proven innocent, shouldn't we just then view them as innocent? Yeah, it's difficult.
It is difficult.
But are they innocent?
Is O.J. Simpson innocent?
You get.
Is Bill Cosby innocent?
No,
but
he's
still under trial.
Yeah, he's still under
proven
trial.
guilty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, as long as they're not proven
Morgan
guilty,
Freeman.
then
Was R. Kelly guilty? He said he admits it. So
But he's not been convicted for anything.
Exactly. That's the point, isn't it? It's like
you can't just. I think Nate Parker's one is also very murky.
Yeah, I mean, she killed herself, didn't she?
Right. Yeah.
So I'm not saying that that would be a bit, but I just think it's hard. Just because somebody is acquitted of a charge doesn't mean that they are guilty. Especially for someone who has such influence and has the power to hire the best lawyers. Just because someone doesn't go to jail doesn't mean that they're not guilty.
Is Michael Jackson innocent?
Is Michael Jackson innocent?
Of course.
But then it's hard to determine how to respond, because what if he is innocent?
What if he is innocent?
What if he is?
What if he's not?
What if he's not?
Yeah,
what if he is?
Have we taken the right stance if he's not? The way our stance on sexual assault should be very firm, and the consequences should be harsh. Do you get? I don't think we should then be like, oh no, are we being too harsh? No, it's sexual assault. You're not dealing with property. You're not dealing with an inanimate object. You're dealing with a person and their personhood. So I think, we should be harsh on it. And maybe it's not, maybe METOO or these movements don't always get them 100% correct. But that's not the point. The heart behind it is correct, I think.
And I think it's also about empowering people to know their rights, and also make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that those who are perpetrators or guilty feel the full extent of the law, safeguarding the rights of everybody else, so people are educated and they know, okay, if I'm in a situation like this, maybe I should just go home. We're both drunk, maybe it should
just not happen.
Or maybe making sure that people are aware of the ramifications of putting themselves in these kind of situations.
So that is a brilliant way to conclude this discussion. We will be back with a part 2. But thank you for joining us. Okay, so today we're discussing, obviously, the METOO campaign. What is the METOO campaign? What? Did you want to talk about how we shouldn't be having sex so flippantly anyway, or should we leave it? End and concluding point? No? Are you going to be rude to me?
Was that a genuine question?
Yeah, because you said it to me.
Oh yeah, I didn't say it to the camera. We shouldn't
That's
be.
why I'm asking.
I don't think that's the point I need to...
Cool, it's a question. Okay, so... What is the METOO campaign?
The METOO campaign is essentially just off the back of Are you laughing at me?
This might not make the edit, by the way.
Cool.
What are we defining? Are you asking me if I've been sexually assaulted at work or harassed?
I don't think that was...
Because you said from your experience. Hold on, that's
just from your experience, just from your understanding.
Is it lopsided?
Some of your friends. Yes. A woman came up to him and grabbed his chest and said, "Wow, you've been going to the gym," and walked off. And so the colleague was saying to me that if that was a woman,
it's the
end of story.
Okay, so that's happened.
Because you didn't want to answer.
No.
I'm joking.
But we'll talk this better topics.
I know, but I was asking you a question.
Someone wants to stay employed.
Okay.
I've got bills.
He doesn't want to be cancelled.
No.